sanawaad tunka ku siday ciddii bartay sida la isu aasay tukaas ah tukaha caqli badan iyo tilmaamo qurxoon oo wanaagsan oo aan halkan kaga wada dhargi karin ayaa lagu tilmaamaa dirkiis miyuu dabar go'ay nuucu ku noolaada ciwaankan aad ka hadlaysaan isbadelka cimilada iyo deegaankeenu miyuu la saaxiibay mise waxba u dhimay baan isdul taagaya si gaara marka modelinka laga hadlayo ani takhasuskaygu waa statistics iyo data science halkaan iska galnay waxa weeye modelkan waxaan uga faa'iidaysanay dhowr arrimood waa markii uu horeeyay ilmo aadan labadii gacantu kala gaadhay ninkii walaalkii ninka kale tunka ku sitay bacdul asarna ay tilmaamaan inuu sanawaad tunka ku siday ciddii bartay sida la isu aasay tukaas ah tukaha caqli badan iyo tilmaamo qurxoon oo wanaagsan oo aan halkan kaga wada dhargi karin ayaa lagu tilmaamaa dirkiis miyuu dabar go'ay nuucu ku noolaada ciwaankan aad ka hadlaysaan isbadelka cimilada iyo deegaankeenu miyuu la saaxiibay mise waxba u dhimay baan isdul taagaya si gaara marka modelinka laga hadlayo ani takhasuskaygu waa statistics iyo data science halkaan iska galnay waxa weeye modelkan waxaan uga faa'iidaysanay dhowr arrimood waa markii u horeysay ee modelkan si gaara loogu khaas yeelay Somaliland iyadoon isticmaalayno spatial analysis si guud spatial analysis marka laga hadlayo xoguhu dhowr nooc bay u dhacaan dhowrka nooc ay u dhacaan mar waxa lagu guraa iyadoo la eegayo goorta iyo waqtiga marna goobta la eega xogaha gooraysada ah iyo kuwa goobaysada kuwa goobta lagu guro saddex nooc baa xogta loo shiilaa nooc waxa la yiraahdaa magaceeda point patterns goobaha uu ku nool yahay tukaha iyo dirkiisu ee Somaliland baa laga soo qaadanayaa xogo latitude iyo longitude iyadoo lagu eegayo meelaha ay joogaan marna waxa laga eegaa xogaha geostatistical oo waa tan dawladeenu ay waxa weeye goobo gaar oo clusters ah xogaha DHS-ka ay ka qaadato marna waxa la eegaa aerial data haddaba tan anu markaa si gaara u tilmaamsanayo uguna badan ta loo adeegsado culumta climate change iyo environmental sustainability waa midda point patterns waxaan u xushay sababta ugu weyn ay tahay helitaanka xogta oo marka qaarkood aad u adag si kooban saddexdan nooc ee analysis-ka lagu sameeyo kaynanugu martiyana waa point patterns kaas aan u adeegsanaya waxaan eegayay saameynta isbedelka cimiladu ku yeelatay tukaha iyo dirkiis si gaar ah waxaan u eegayay modelada nooca u gaarka ah marka dirka shimbiraha la eegayo ama species modelinka gaar ahaan shimbiraha waxaan si gaar ah u dul istaagayay dirkaas uu tukuhu ka tirsan yahay gaar ahaan methodology-ga ama dariiqadan isticmaalay waxay ahayd mid ii saamaxaysa iyadoon waafajinayo baahida deegaankeena shimbirkaas si fiican idin uga dharagsantihiin oo idinku habsaamin maayo waxaan dul istaagayay marka hore point patterns waxaa jira santaro internationala oo xogaha kaydiya ecology-ga ama ha noqdaan kuwa ka yimaada deegaanka caadiga shimbiro iyo wixii la halmaala iyo dhammaan dirarka kala duwan ha noqdaan kuwa badaha ku nool iyo ha noqdaan kuwa si kale waxa weeyaan uga duwanba haddaad arkaysaan sawirka idin muuqda goobaha aad arkaysaan waa intan Hargeysa iyo agagaarkeeda gaar ahaan Somaliland number aad u tiro badan oo 736 ayaa xog laga hayay tukaha iyo dirkiisa 736 iyo 6 xabo ee soo doortay waxaan eegayay siday waxa weeyaan ugu nugul yihiin isbedelka cimilada iyo climate change-ga waxa ay xadidayay cilmi baari ahaan suuragalnimada daatada methodology-ga aan doortay markaa waxa uu ahaa mid la jaan qaadaya baahida deegaankeena ka jirta waad ogtihiin oo haddaan maanta idin imaadoon idin weydiiyo iska dhaaf xoole iyo xayawaane dadka xogtooda bay nagu yar markaan shimbir ka sii hadlo een tukayo dirkii ka sii hadlana xogtiisa waa dareemi kartaanba saas aawadeed waxay xadidayay mar walba availability-ga daatada mar labaad waxaan ka cararayay sayna xogtaydu bias u noqon inaan isticmaalo traditional models deedna waxay igu kaliftay inaan model u cusub oo cilmi baarista isagu u gaar ah aan u develop gareeyo anoo barbar dhigi doona kuwii hore u jiri jiray sawirka aad arkaysaan waxaan soo xushay xogta intii la heli karay waxaan soo xushay 6 variable oo isbedelka cimilada wax badan iga waxa kamida temperature-ka on 3 ba ka soo qaatay marka uu yahay mean celcelis ahaan iyo marka uu minimum-ka yahay iyo marka uu yahay maximum-ka xaddiga roobka ee Soomaaliland ka da'aya precipitation-ka waxaan soo doortay isagana waxa loo yaqaan solar radiation-ka iyo wind speed-ka ama wind energy inta aan soo xushay waxa ii dheer variable-ka marka isagoo iyo problem-ka aan baarayo ah dirkan tukaha iyo waxa weeyaan sida ugu filaqsan yahay Soomaaliland variable-da aan qaadanaya ayaan eegayay autocorrelation-ka iyo isbedelka cimilada uu la leeyahay jiritaanka iyo goobaha uu joogo dirka tukuhu kabacdi waxaan sameeyay saddexdan meelood ba aha meelaha ugu badan xogta ka soo qaadanay goobi waxa la radaa e-bird-ka shimbiraha iyo dirkooda ayaa lagu kaydiyaa internationally anoo goynaya latitude-ka longitude-ka iyo geographically scope-ka Soomaaliland dhacdo ayaan soo qaadanay inta Soomaaliland ku nool kaliya la report gareeyay meesha labaad waa GBIF-ka Global Biodiversity Information Facility-ga waa page weyn xogtana isaga sahlaya waayo package baa jira hadda laga dhaxlo software-kan arta oo la yiraahdo RGBIF kaasan markaa ku soo jirayay anoo eegaya tukaha iyo dirkiisa inta Soomaaliland ku nool kaliya meesha kale isaacidaysa waxay ahayd OBIS oo iyadoo hadda maanta presentation-keeda diyaar uma yihi kulamada damaan kaga hadli doona waa dirka badaheena ku jiray iyo iyagana sida isbedelka cimiladu u saameysay laakiin hadda waqti ma u haysto sources-ka datadu taasay processing markaan ku sameeyay kadib waxaan ku sameeyay analysis waxyaalaha ay soo baxay ee aad ku cajabka ah waxa kamid ahaa 6 variable aan consider gareeyay waxaan u maleynayaa muuqaalku yar khafiif 6 variable 3 kamid ah waxay saaxiib la yihiin inuu tukuhu goobta uu ku nool yahay laazimi karo ku tarbi karo kuna dhali karo waa celceliska temperature-ka marka uu fiican yahay una extreme ahayn waxaan ka cararayna kalaama change-ga qabow qayraxadina uusan jirin waxa uu aad u soo dhaweysay meelaha uu aad ugu noolaa oo caan ku noqday meelaha waxa weeyaan wind speed-ku uu miinka ama celceliska dhexdhexaad ahaan uu yahay variable-ka saddexaad oo aad u saacido waxa ah roobka oo imika aad waxa loo carabaabay abaaraha inagu soo noqnoqonaya waxa weeyaan iska kan yeeshay saddexdaas arimood saacidid iyo saaxiib ilay saddex cagsigooda oo mawduucan u martinay ah oo hadduu temperature-ku xadka ka baxo iyo hadduu qabow daran yimaado iyo waxa weeyaan solar radiation-ka ozone-ka dhaawaca ku imanaya way u daran yihiin sida inaga inoogu daran yihiin saddexdaas anoo eegaya waxaan eegay bal inaan ku sameeyo prediction mustaqbalka maxaa dhici doona sawirka aad arkaysaan bay soo baxay mustaqbalka wuxuu ii tilmaamay laba magaalo oo xagga xeebaha xiga Soomaaliland in lagu ku sii hari doono inta kale oo dhan inuu bahalkaas ka soo dabargoy xiriir baana ka dhaxeeya isaga iyo aadamuhu meeshu isagu jecel yahay jecel waa shimbir dabeecado badan inaga inala wadaaga labada variable ka soo daran markaan u eegayay sida baan u saameeyay waxaan labada furaha u ah isbedelka cimilada waa roobka iyo temperature-ka khulaasada labada variable maxay yihiin inagu markaa daran markaan u eegayay sida ka jirta Soomaa sorry inaga markaa inagu eegina saameyntaasi waxay soo baxday sad arkaysaan inay noqdeen waxyaalaha uu u nugul yahay temperature-ka xad dhaafka precipitation-ka roob yaraanta dhacaysa iyo solar radiation-ka hadduu ku xoog bato ee dhaawaca aan ku wadno ozone-ka aynu sii kordhino waxyaalaha fariin ahaan aynu halkan uga faa'iideysanayno waxay tahay aadame keligii uunka ma camiri karo hadduu waayo intii la camiraysay dirkaas shimbir hadday tahay hadday cidday doonto tahayba sidaan ugu nugulnahay ugu nugul yihiin intaynu rabnay rabaan marka dawlad ahaan si loo ilaalin lahaa protection loogu sameyn lahaa eriyooyinkiisa sidii waxa weeye restoration-ka habitat-kiisa aynu uga qayb qaadan lahayn ama si guud waxa weeyaan meelaha isaga saacida aynu ugu caawin lahayn inuu waxa weeye jiritaankiisu sii xoogayso waa waxyaalaha ugu badan ee fariin ahaan halkan aan ku gudbinayo meelaha xeebaha iyo dhulalka u dhow ubaalkaasi aad ugu nool yahay keligii ma fariintu yacni kuma eka keliya waa laga yaabaa qof inuu isweydiiyo dadkii baa dhimanaya muxuu wadaadkan ah tuka la hadal hayaa war tuka haddaad waxa weeye ilaashan weyday adna ilaashan mimaysid fariintaydu intaasaan ku soo koobay 10 daqiiqo la siiyay cilmi baaristana waxaan la wadaagi doonaa wasaaradda si page-ka loo soo dhigo iyadoo ku daabacan ecological indicatorska journal weyn oo kuyuwana waana markii ugu horeysay inta ogaalkayga ee maabka Soomaaliland oo ku gaara spatial analysis lagu sameeyo dirar kalena waan daba wadaa anigoo uga kitaab qaadan doona ustaadkayga weyn Ibrahim Cawal halkaan ka arkayo mahadsantiin salaam alaykum warahmatullahi
Assalamu alaikum. Hello, hello. Dr. Abdussalam Hassan, thank you very much. Hello. Well, I will give a quick summary for our guests who are English speakers. So Dr. Abdussalam is an assistant professor and a Director of Research and Innovation Center at Amud University in Boromir. He holds a PhD in statistics as an expert on data science, environmental modeling, and has over 10 years of experience of teaching and specializes in mathematics and statistics for the last 3 years, mashallah. So his research was around the habitats of crows and how they have been impacted by climate change. He spoke about how climate change has impacted their life cycle, their habitat, and he's used spatial analysis for the first time in Somaliland to map how these changes have taken place and correlate them with current climate change that we see in Somaliland. He developed a predictive model, so he estimates that in the coming years there will only be 2 areas in Somaliland where crows will habitat, and that is not the case at the moment. So that's a very harrowing prediction. He said obviously that when we're talking about crows, it's a proxy measure for human life too, where crows can't survive because they survive with humans, humans will struggle too. So it's a very interesting piece of research, and his final note was that the government really needs to think about protective policies, not just for our wildlife, but also looking forward to see how climate change will impact us in the longer term. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdussalam, that was fascinating. I will call to the stage Dr. Mary Barkworth, who's going to give us a presentation on biodiversity data in conservation and restoration. Please take the stage, Dr.
Thank you. I think it's on? Okay. I'm the first person that cannot speak in Somali at all. I apologize. I thank you for the invitation. It's an honor, considering my limitation there. My interest, as the title says, is biodiversity data. What do we mean by that? Well, first of all, starting off with biodiversity, we can all say it means all kinds of organisms. In actual fact, most of us don't know all kinds of organisms. We know of them, but we don't know them. And one of the things that I'm interested in is documenting the biodiversity of Somaliland, not myself, enabling and encouraging people, the Somalilanders, to do this. What have I done? Should be right. It's not echoing the same way as before. Can you still hear me? Okay, somebody try this and I will shout. Shout. All right, so the thing about biodiversity is lots of different kinds, and we want to do, hold it lower down and don't push the button. Okay. And so what we have been focusing on, and we had a workshop last week with Amud and University of Barao and University of Hargeisa, talking to some of their instructors and the students about how do you make collections, make specimens that people can come back to even 500 years later and say, we know exactly what they found there then. I didn't do a thing to the button. And so that was the focus. And it's not just collecting the specimens for the specimen's sake. It's for learning the biology of these organisms, for learning what grows with what, I don't understand. And or what lives with what. And collecting the data about them, where you collected them, exactly where you collected them, and sharing those data. And the last speaker mentioned GBIF, and that is where we ultimately wish to share our data. And so we're getting what we call a current state and data. We saw it there then, and different kinds of organisms. And in that picture there, we've got a typical herbarium specimen, insects. But at the same time as you're recording that, and you're recording the insects in the soil and the underground organisms, you should also be recording the environmental conditions. And one of the things that it's appropriate that looks at is something that records the humidity and the temperature of the soil. Because as you change things, as you're trying to make things so that more will stay and reproduce there, and particularly if you're trying to do restoration of land that has been degraded, you want to know the impact of what you do. And biodiversity data is a good way of saying, look, this is the impact. We have got more kinds of organisms. We have got different kinds of organisms. We have got different quantities of organisms. And whether that's good or bad will depend on whether you think the organism is good or bad. But you will understand the ecology of your land better if you know more about its diversity in an area. And so it's point data, but it's point data for all the organisms that you know how to cope with at that point. And eventually, I hope we'll be able to add bird records, not by killing birds, but by keeping records of bird songs and maybe sometimes getting feathers and things like that to record that was there then. So that's biodiversity data. That was there then. So, and here's for it. Boy, this is touchy. So you're looking at how much of each. For plants, you generally look at coverage. And you also, as I say, want to go on to the conditions of the soil and stuff. Now, when you do this knowledge building, I'm talking about data sharing. That means that everybody can go up and get your raw data. And one of the things, there's a principle called FAIR. And you may think what being fair means, but FAIR means the data are free, they are accessible. In other words, you can get them off the internet. You do not have to go to a library and ask somebody to send you a book. They are interoperable. Now, this is one that's a little trickier. That is that one computer can tell another computer, and the other computer will understand it. So the humans have to tell the computers in ways that even a computer brain, which is very small in some ways, can share it with another computer. Essentially, that means tell them what you did to monitor this, what the numbers were, and what the units are that you're measuring in. So, and that's called metadata. So it's data and metadata. And we need to start teaching students to think in these terms at the university level in their undergraduate curriculum, because the more you can get stuff learned earlier, easier graduate work will be. So you want to then, you're recording the data according to these FAIR principles of what grows where, when, or what lives where, when, and you share those data, and that way you will build knowledge faster because you are all working together. You don't have to be at that institution or in that country. And so those are the three universities. They will be sending their data to GBIF. Haag already does, Haagesa. And I was looking at where you could share more ecological data, such as coverage and things like that, and it seems like EcoBank is, though it's a Korean place developed, but if you just type in EcoBank, you will get a bank for Africa somewhere. So EcoBank biology. And getting back to permanent plots, I really think that having permanent plots, and they don't have to be big, 10 meters by 10 meters, would be a good demonstration for your local community. They'd be a good learning place for students to go and acquire knowledge. But importantly, you will be able to trace changes over time. And if you have different starting points, and you know them, that this was in a bad area, this was in a good area, biologically speaking, then you'll be able to compare progress. But one of the things that's been suggested is that you should plant a whole mass of native species densely, and then let them fight it out. Because that's what you want. You want species that will grow in that area, reproduce in that area, and be more stable. And Miyawaki came up with this idea in terms of saplings and forests in Japan. It has been used quite a bit, but mostly in more mesic environments. So this would be somewhat of a research thing. How well will this work in different parts of Somaliland? But when you plant diversity, then you allow them to build the interactions between them, because plants get their nutrients from the soil, but they get into the soil sometimes through fungi digesting some things that they have found, some organic matter. They digest it and make it into forms that the plants then can ingest. So there's lots of interactions we really can't monitor very easily and we don't know about. But if you've got diverse organisms, you're going to get them better. The diagram here was just an example of Miyawaki versus traditional. And so I have sort of done this quick slide on infrastructure and maintenance. And I think the biggest thing that came through to me, and Gulab Ahmed from Landa Prosopis was trying to do this, the frustration was getting seeds or saplings of native species. So I would really encourage the development of native seed banks and nurseries, those species, because if you want to have plants that will survive in Somaliland's environment, its present one, and probably in some of the next ones, I'm not going to predict 50 years into the future, then having native species is really good. You do need to break up the soil and do what you can to amend it and put more organic matter in it. But the thing is, you only water it for 1 to 3 years. After that, they're on their own. You want a sustainable area. I'm not adapted to this. And your forever needs, you do need to control use. If you have 100 animals go in and eat everything that they like there, you will change your environment, but not necessarily in the way you want. So that's what I mean by controlling use. You may have to weed it forever. The thing about weeds is they're highly successful. And they may be able to put out a whole bunch of seeds. And some of them will only require a 3-day dormancy, and some of them may require a 3-year dormancy, and some of them a 30-year dormancy. You're going to be weeding and weeding and weeding. So keep those under control and basically monitor. But getting the habit of monitoring and watching what you have, you will then catch changes fast, and you'll start to see the interactions between things. And this last winter, Faisal Jama and Haya Ismail from MOECC went and talked to some people, and one of the things they were all at 3 different villages, and one of the things they all said is we must have stronger enforcement of agreements, laws and local agreements about grazing. And with that, I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Technical issues. mistake. My apologies, Mary. Professor Mary. Waxay ka hadlaysay iyo waxa ku nool Somaliland sida research laga sameeyo. Sababta research ka u sameynayso. waxay ka hadlaysay researchka ka sameynayso dhirta iyo waxa bakteeriyada iyo ciidda ku nool Somaliland sababtay tahay isbedelka cimilada marka isbedel badan ay timaado waxa ku nool dalkana way isbedelaysaa wixii dhirtii wixii ku noolaa bakteeriyada xitaa ciidda laga helo marka waxay lahayd strategy marka information
other delegates. I'm going to talk about promoting biodiversity conservation and climate resilience through protected area development in Somalia. I want to let us realize the critical state we're in with biodiversity and climate change today. We have close to 11,000 species. As close as I'd like to. Oh, okay. There are close to 11,000 species affected by climate change today, and that presents a huge amount of global biodiversity loss. 40% of our terrestrial land animals are under threat, and by 2050, we could have lost close to 40% of them. Large carnivores are also very much affected by climate change. I represent and work with cheetahs. Cheetahs are a top predator, and with that, they're important for balance in ecosystems. They're icons of our arid landscapes, and they're living where most of our poorest people are throughout the regions in Africa. Unfortunately, we're losing the cheetah at a very great rate, going from about 100,000 cheetahs about 100 years ago down to less than 7,000 cheetahs today. That's a huge loss, and this is the fastest land animal in the world. Habitat loss really is affecting the desertification caused by climate change. We've got illegal wildlife pet trade that's going on here, which increases when we've got problems with climate change, and livelihoods which are involved. Human-wildlife conflict is also affected, primarily because of the degradation of the land. We've got issues around the grasslands, water, prey base, and all of this causes a greater problem for many of the species. And in addition, the cheetah is a very unique species that it does lack genetic diversity. And when we have the climate change problems that we're facing today, we also look at reproductive abnormalities. I'm based down in Namibia, and I've been in Namibia for about 35 years, which is, again, one of the poorest and most arid countries in the world, and then have recently, in the last 7 years, set up a base up in here in Somaliland, dealing with the effects of cheetahs and how we can actually affect their survival. And so I actually have mirrored both areas from arid landscapes in Namibia, looking at trying to develop programs that can be affected change here in Somaliland. So I'm sure you're all thinking, what can saving the cheetah combat climate change? Well, when you have a top predator, you've got greater biodiversity, you've got intact ecosystems, and that allows for climate resilience. Apex predators are important in an ecosystem, and they actually integrate greater biodiversity. Removing top predators has a cascading effect to the smallest species, as well as to the soils and to the water health. And here in the Horn of Africa, we've had a great problem where we've seen between 200 to 300 cheetahs a year for the last about 15 years, which have been transported out of this region into the Middle East. And about 20% survival rate, which is quite horrific for actually one of the Africa's most endangered species. They're going through, transiting from here into the Middle East. So our programs have been trying to stop the illegal wildlife pet trade. And what we've done is we've taken an approach to look at rescue and rehabilitation, prevention, the legal framework, demand reduction, and international collaborations to try to stop this trade. We've helped work together with the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change in developing a rescue and conservation center outside of Gedebli. Here we not only take care of animals, we're working on education, research, ecotourism, and have developed one of the first of its kind centers in all of the Horn of Africa. So with education, we've taken again our models from Namibia, where we've had many of our Ministry of Environment and other politicians from here in Somaliland down into Namibia, as well as some of our staff, to come and learn about our programs that have been very forthcoming in trying to not only combat climate change in the arid landscapes of Namibia, but develop community-based natural resource management programs. So not only through farmer training work, ranger training work, and also working with school children. So we've actually developed a coexistence approach to conservation, offering solutions to communities who are living alongside of wildlife. We're a research facility too. So we do have at this point, sadly, 95 cheetahs that are living up at the Gedebli Rescue Center. But with this, they've been very important to figure out where these animals have come from. And much of our research in cooperation with the ministry has allowed us to sadly uplist this population in the Horn of Africa to an endangered species, looking at potentially going into a critically endangered species. And so that has not been good, but on the other hand, through the research that we've been able to conduct has been important. At the Gedebli facility, we do have a full-scale veterinary clinic and facilities that we're working on to develop the center around the area. As we develop this, we're also looking at the benefits to the communities of potential ecotourism. And that ecotourism, we're looking at potentially local people here, or the diaspora that are coming from around the world. I work very closely with the diaspora in the United States, as well as developing relationships in that of Canada and in the UK. So as I mentioned, this is one of the most beautiful areas there is in the world, and it is in coexistence with the communities that are living on these lands. From our programs in Namibia, our program is to save the cheetah, but yes, we are a community-based program and we work with people. We're not only looking at the research and the conservation, but human-wildlife conflict intervention, habitat restoration, which is important, and all the other aspects around this to save the cheetah. And we're putting all of those into adapting them and developing them here in Somaliland as well. Currently, we're developing an education and training center complex, and we will be available, we hope, in the next 6 months, where people will be able to come not only for education programs, but you can actually come and bring other conferences out here to the training center as well. So over the last 7 years, we've not only been very active in the rescue and the rehabilitation, but we've been working as hard as we can to prevent the illegal trade and look at the conservation measures that it's going to take in order to try to help save the cheetah and work with the communities on whose land the cheetahs are living. And with this, we've been looking at protected area development. And we've started by doing biodiversity studies, working again with the Ministry. We've traveled around much of the area of Somaliland, and right now we're pretty much focused on the Adal region. And here we've developed a lot of different programs. But through our surveys, and I've been very lucky to see as much of Somaliland as I possibly could safely, and I have met probably many of the rural people, men and women and children, throughout the country. And I have to say that it is one of the most amazing countries that I've ever seen, and I've traveled throughout most of the cheetahs' rangelands. But yes, cheetahs are a predator, and people do consider them to be a problem to their livestock. So we've looked at that, and this map shows where villages have seen cheetahs. This is an area that is not reported to even have cheetahs in the area. So nobody's ever even done any studies in this area. So as we've wandered through the area and done our surveys, we've also found many of the other areas where the other wildlife species are. And these are the areas where we put our focuses to look at where communities can benefit by living in harmony with the wildlife. Our ecological surveys have been done through systematic surveys. As we've gone through the land, we've seen a lot of amazing wildlife species, and many of these are also rare and endangered species, which are really important, but many of the communities don't know that. Although they do see and do report the animals, but they've not been shared with how important their wildlife is here in the region and the country. The areas that I want to talk about today are that of the Zala area that we are recommending to the government as being a national park. And this area goes up into the coast. It's also an area that should be a World Heritage Site. It's a very, very special area and could very well become your first national park. We're trying to work towards that. We are also, this year, have developed 2 conservancies. One is the Gedebli area around where our center is based, and also the Adal Conservancy. And this has been working also with doing FPICs, where we've gone around, we've done a lot of community-based awareness, and then have put the people through training programs, and then they've actually signed legal documents with the government that they are willing to be a part of a conservancy initiative, where the communities will be actually learning to manage their natural resources, and that will be to affect the changes in climate look at the biodiversity, and also start looking at the potential around ecotourism opportunities. We've done a lot through this doing camera trapping as well, and right now we do have a camera trap survey going on. It's a very large survey that the first stages are in the Adal region as well as up in Zala to try to actually get the information about the biodiversity that's within this area. We've worked closely by developing a lot of posters, awareness. I'm putting the posters up here because I don't read Somali, but all of our information is in Somali language, which we present out to the Somali communities. And then we have offered with the camera trap pictures, that their communities are actually very much involved in helping protect the camera traps, which will be available information for everybody looking at the biodiversity in these areas. We've also done a lot with training around village wildlife rangers. And with this, as top shows, showing wildlife rangers, teaching them. We've worked down along the Somaliland-Ethiopia border, as well as we've got them all around Gedebli, and we're trying to put more wildlife rangers out, and could very easily tie into the work that Mary just talked with you about as well. And then our school programs and our education programs are very important because, as we heard earlier, that desertification and dryland farming is a really important problem. It is going to affect more than 1 billion livelihoods. And these are people that are your family members. These are people that are living on the land that I've gotten to know. And nobody wants to be a poor starving farmer in the middle of the poorest areas in the world. But about 40% of the world's income really comes around the meat industry, the milk industry, and depends on healthy dryland ecosystems. So our Future Farmer of Africa training program basically deals with how you can interact with wildlife on your land. We teach predator-friendly methods, and also the value of wildlife for healthy ecosystems. We've worked together with many different stakeholders, many of who are in the room here. Last year we worked together on a key biodiversity area, as well as developing an organization called SAXO, which is a community-based organization that I'd like to tell you a little bit more about. Working with our communities and talking with them about ways that they can be involved in conservation. So a vision of SAXO really is partners working together to achieve CBNRM, to develop biodiversity programs in Somaliland. And we've got a very great mission coming together with the different NGOs here in the room, and to really look at incorporating biodiversity and nature-based solutions. Work over the last several years. We did work with the government of Somaliland to visit both Namibia and Kenya to learn about our national parks in both of these countries, as well as conservancy development and the benefits economically to the communities as we get ready. We're just publishing this community conservation booklet, which will be used for training programs with about 100 people from the Adal and Gedebli conservancies, representing about 50 villages and close to 60,000 people, and helping them learn to govern themselves and develop a management plan around their conservancies. We've worked again with the government on legal aspects because we're dealing with illegal trade but also wildlife, and we've got to try to make sure that it's in Parliament to such an extent that the communities can have value. We've also worked cross-border, not only with that of Somaliland, but also in Ethiopia, and we've developed cross-border relationships, and the conservancies could also possibly can be cross-border, as well as to helping develop a crime unit that is working to try to stop the illegal wildlife trade. So our first conservancy, which is the Gedebli Conservancy, again has been signed up, and we are going through the FPIC, which was here. They've signed their names, they've developed governance committees, and the communities are going to be working together to develop these areas for their benefits and the benefits of the landscape. So my message really is that wildlife can finance climate mitigation efforts. Wildlife is a country's natural capital, and healthy wildlife populations can also eventually help us find, we hope, biodiversity credits. So we're into this to try to help find solutions, and our solutions really revolve around that of sustainable rangelands that everybody can live on, but we need to reduce the impact, we need to grow more grass, and get profit better by having healthier livestock, and integrate it with wildlife populations that can also bring ecotourism into our communities. That will allow for more biodiversity, livelihood diversification, looking at capacity building. So it's not just the people who are in universities that are able to manage the land, but it's the communities on whose land the wildlife and the wildlife are living. And then this will allow us to have climate resilient ecosystems that will benefit all of the communities as well as the government. And then the potential to actually take this model and actually scale it across the Horn of Africa. So I'd like to thank the partners that we've worked with. Again, many of them are in the room, and we really thank the support that we've gotten to be able to do this work. Primarily, I want to mention that of DEFRA, which has been a great support to us, as well as that of the Taiwan government. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Laurie. We're now going to have a panel discussion here on the stage with some of our esteemed guests. Can I call up Professor Mary, Dr. Laurie, as well as Ahmed Ibrahim Awale. The moderator today's session will be Asma Hirsi.
The living things actually into periphery. There is overfishing in our seas. There's also land use changes. All these are contributing to the biodiversity loss. So the question is, what we can do about.
So in our panel, we will be exploring the challenges and opportunities in safeguarding biodiversity, the impact of climate change, and sustainable ecosystem management. We are very honored to have an exceptional panelists who bring extensive expertise and diverse background on this critical issue. Our first guest of speaker is Dr. Laurie Marker. Dr. Laurie, she is a zoologist, researcher, author, and educator. She is also a wildlife conservation expert. She has been globally recognized as one of the foremost experts on cheetahs. She is the founder and executive director of Cheetah Conservation Fund. She leads the organization, an organization that works on cheetah rehabilitation, reintroduction programs, and she also does a lot of research in conservation biology and ecology. Dr. Marker also advocates ecosystem preservationists, integrating community participation and education. She is also a professor at Cornell University. And to add on that, she is also my mentor. Our next guest of speaker is Mary Buckworth. She is a botanist, a professor at Utah State University. She is the co-founder of Somaliland Biodiversity Foundation, an organization that is dedicated to document and preserve Somaliland's unique biodiversity. Her work emphasizes the use of biodiversity data to inform conservation and restoration strategies. Our last guest of speaker is Mr. Awale, Ahmed Ibrahim Awale. He's a Somali influential environmentalist. He's an author who wrote quite a number of books, such as Environment in Crisis, Introduction to Plants in Central Somaliland. Awale is also the co-founder of Candlelight for Environment, Education and Health program. He is also the co-founder of Somaliland Biodiversity Foundation. Awale he also advocates sustainable environmental policies in Somaliland. He is also a professor at University of Hargeisa, College of Applied and Natural Science. Please welcome our guest of honor, and thank you very much. So, it's a great pleasure to have you all today, and it's my honor to be the moderator of this panel. We'll just begin our discussion. I would like to direct the first question to Mr. Awale. Based on your experience with the environment and biodiversity in Somaliland, what do you believe are the main drivers of biodiversity loss in Somaliland? And what strategies do you think would be most effective to control or to restore the land, the degraded land? So please welcome.
Thank you very much, Asma. And I'm very pleased to be a part of this very important discussion with two prominent environmentalists, that's Dr. Mary and Dr. Lowry. And actually, I would also like to take this opportunity to laud, the sacrifices of Mary Buckworth, my colleague. We co-founded together the Somaliland Biodiversity Foundation in 2015. It's really interesting that, after she became retired, she chose to come to Somaliland to contribute to the developing biodiversity resources in Somaliland. So I would like to request from the audience to give her, an applause. Thank you so much. Now coming to the question, of course, the rate of biodiversity loss in the world globally is very alarming. And there was a recent report from World Wildlife Fund 2024, which estimated that, there was something like 73% loss of wildlife within 50 years, within the past 50 years. Imagine also we have our share of that biodiversity loss. For example, there are some iconic, wildlife which we have lost over those years. For example, there is the, I don't know if you heard, many of you have heard about, the diptag. That's the Clark's gazelle. I think the last time it was seen, it's over 25 years. The same thing with the Somali wild ass, Gumburi. It's believe it that actually it has disappeared, even though it's not assured in Somaliland. The same thing with the lion. In the 70s, it abounded. But again, also, you will find in the history books that, you know, the last elephant was found dead on the Brawen Range in Audal area in 1958. So if this is happening, you know, to the iconic and the big animals, what's happening to the, you know, I mean, the plant is the small microorganisms. So at the same time, Key Botanic Gardens, they issued a report about the actually decline of fauna. They mentioned it in a report called the State of the Wild Plants. They mentioned it in 2023 that half of the flowering plants are at the risk of extinction. So what are the drivers of this actual extinction? It's human-driven extinctions. Of course, climate change is also actually caused mainly by human actions. So the main problems actually that are challenges that are causing this extinction are biodiversity loss, are the habitat loss and habitat fragmentation, devegetation, deforestation. We understand what's happening now in our country. I mean, the presentation from ministry actually mentioned about, you know, the harvesting, the mass harvesting of the acacia species for charcoal. There's also the issue of the invasives, whether they are living things, whether they are plants, and most importantly, we're talking about the Prosopis tulivolora, which actually even the project Lori is running, the area is invested with this Prosopis, which degrades the ecosystem and pushes, you know, the living things actually into periphery. There is overfishing in our seas. There's also land use changes. All these are contributing to the biodiversity loss. So the question is what we can do about arresting or at the same time slowing down this kind of actually biodiversity loss. I think what we do is what we call ecosystem restoration. That means we have to do some kind of a remediation to remedy, you know, the areas that has been actually damaged. One of the best things to do is revegetation. And that's exactly the program, you know, the ministry was talking about this morning. Again, the removal of the invasive plants, particularly the Prosopis, is very, very important. We need to establish more protected areas. Thanks, Lori has talked about, suggested that, you know, an area near Sela she recommended that it should be declared as a protected area. We also need marine protected areas to be established, for example, in the areas where we have mangroves. And of course, in addition to that, we need to restore our rangelands. And that's, most importantly, I think, you know, we have to actually do a lot of tree planting in order to circumvent actually this biodiversity loss. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Awale. Before I go to next panelist, I would like to remind our panelists that each person has 4 minutes to answer the question. And because of timing, please, I would like to remind you again. Again, thank you very much, Mr. Awale, for those valuable insights. Building on that, I would like to hear Dr. Margaret's perspective on the role of protective area in conservation. In other words, how can protected area be better managed to enhance biodiversity conservation and ensure the sustainability of wildlife population? Thank you very much, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you for that. I tried quickly to talk about the protected area overview, but there are a variety of different categories of protected areas within IUCN. One of them is a national park, which is the highest level of protection. And then with that, it comes down into a variety of other protected areas, of which conservancies are one that is very recommended within communities. So having a variety of different protected areas is important. I think 2030 has suggested that 30% of the country's land is supposed to have protected areas, at least 30% protected areas. And so I think that that's an important thing. I think working together with the communities and many of the professionals that I've worked with in the country, we're now identifying many of these different areas which could have very important biodiversity aspect. Within a protected area that is a national park, it really suggests that people are not in it. When you get different levels, like community conservancies, people can be within that, but then you have a gradation of zonation of where people can have different economic benefits. So a fully protected area is areas where people are not in, but that is then run by the government, and those are expensive also to run and manage. And it also then needs that we need to have greater capacity building in training our rangers and having a national park workforce. And so the community program, which is where we've started within the Adal and the Gedebli area, allows for governance, but also developing management plans, which hopefully will provide them the opportunities of looking at economic benefits as well. Livelihood diversification and utilization of their land in alternative ways than just through livestock. So I encourage everyone to work together towards these ideas around protected areas, but it's going to take all of us to work together to make it successful.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marker. Now I will ask a question to Mari. So, yeah. So Mari, considering the extensive experience you have in biodiversity, how is climate change affecting biodiversity, and what adaptive measures can be implemented to protect vulnerable species?
Okay. Oh, you got. We're hoping. Thank you. In terms of how climate change is affected, one of the concerns is the business of the interactions that go on among species. Taking it at the simplest level, if a flower is out and there's no pollinator for it, then it's not good. You will not get seed set. Alternatively, if the pollinator comes out, and pollinators are not interested in pollinating flowers, they're after food. And so if they don't find any flowers that will give them the food out, then they die. Now those are very simplistic examples, but that is one of the concerns, that one part of a partnership may adapt or may be unaffected, but the other part will not. And the only way you can find these things out is sort of looking in detail at what's going on in terms of the reproduction of individual species. So where does the biodiversity data come in? It suggests that if you can get enough data in about what co-occurs, which is what collections tend to do, you will get some suggestions as to what to look at in that regard. And I would also sort of endorse a lot of things that the others have said, and that one of them is this business of areas, and you involve the community. I left off a couple of slides to try and keep us on time, but one is education, all the way down. That first grade when you bring students in, and if they could grow a plant and learn what a plant needs to grow and produce a fruit that can be eaten by the family at the end of the year. Start there, but as you go on, you introduce record keeping and noticing how things grow. So, and I don't teach at that level, so I don't want to go into detail about it, but use small areas and I wasn't thinking of the formal protection areas, but as I said, 10 meters by 10 meters, demonstrations, and the demonstrations not only for the people outside, but it's for the local community. Look how this has changed over time. And you have some around that are not changed over time, but at the same time use them for teaching monitoring and for learning from monitoring. And I remember one speaker from Kenya, and he said that they were monitoring, it was grassland recovery after grazing, and they thought it was all, the recovery was determined by how much the rains were. And it wasn't. It was how many animals were left allowed to graze on the land. And you'd say, well, that's fairly obvious. When people found their own children telling them this is what the data say, they began to believe it. Before that, they thought it was all a matter of the rains, or at least they claimed they did. So I think the community involvement and in education and having areas around that they can see the impact of looking after small parts of land maybe will be helpful. At least that would be my hope.
Thank you very much, Marie. As Marie mentioned, community education is one of the key important things that can be done to address the issue of climate change. And following up her thought is, I would like to ask Dr. Lori, what roles do local communities play in conservation? I know you have been working in local communities in Namibia and local communities in Somaliland, specifically the future farmers of Africa. But in your own opinion, what role do local communities play in conservation sector?
Well, I think local communities are the people, and they are who provide the government. They're your voters. They're also the ones on the land who are living on the land. And as they can be a part of the solution to what the problem is, the local communities have the greatest power to make change. And I think that they can make change very rapidly through a cooperative program and a guidance program. And I believe that we've got everything within this room that could actually make that happen. So although we do need funding, I think that the communities working together will find the funding that they're going to need in order to help make the change that has to happen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marker. Just following up that same question, I would like also to ask again, Dr. Marker. I would like also to ask the same follow-up question, is that how can community engagement can enhance to be achieved in long-term conservation goals? In other words, working with the local community, how can we enhance the long-term conservation goals? How can we reach the long-term conservation goals by working with the local community?
Well, I think the only way we can do that is through helping them with livelihood development. And so that, in my opinion, would be the best way to go, because they want to get out of poverty, everybody does, and looking at alternatives on their land and not moving everybody off their land, but looking at alternative benefits. And one of the aspects that I see here is the great potential that a well-developed community-based ecotourism could actually bring a lot of community benefits. I'd also like to see areas that have more water. So I'd love to see water held. In Namibia, we are also dry and we have dams and water everywhere. And also see that there are benefits around utilization of the thickened thorn bush that you have, the prosopis, which we've tried to also look at not only animal feed, but biomass electricity and a variety of other aspects around that. And our government now in Namibia is actually making a biomass energy plant. So there are a variety of different aspects, but I'd say economics.
Thank you, Dr. Marker. I will now ask Mr. Awale. Awale, you have mentioned it earlier that the most drivers of biodiversity loss are mostly anthropogenic factors, like human-made factors. So in Somaliland context, one of the main factors, as you have mentioned it earlier, is deforestation or charcoal production. So in your own experience, how can we tackle or how can we reduce in policy-wise the deforestation and production of charcoal?
Thank you very much. It's a fact that charcoal production is contributing to climate change, changing local microclimates, and at the same time affecting the livelihoods of the communities. So it's a very challenging issue. But what I actually would suggest that, we understand that, for example, the ministry or the government promised actually to distribute 3 million seedlings within their term. That's really a good achievement, could be a good achievement. But let's see actually how the charcoal is harvested and which trees it's harvested. Mainly it's harvested from acacia trees. So we need actually to encourage, the replanting of the indigenous species. We need our universities and the ministry also actually to look into research, also counting on experience elsewhere about fast-growing species that are ideal for charcoal. For the coming future, actually, it will continue. Charcoal will be continuing. The population is increasing. The affordability is there, even though actually, many people now are shifting to cleaner energy, like, the LPG, but not everybody will be affording. I think more restrictions on the harvesting of the indigenous species and encouraging the harvesting of the invasives, like the Prosopis julivalora. I think it can actually, a good charcoal can be produced from that. So my suggestion is that let's also actually not only do research, but also give incentives to the community awareness on the issue of planting indigenous species. Maybe, for example, one of the choice species is the soksok, Acacia pica, because Acacia pica, if you cut it, it will coppice again. It will coppice again in comparison to the Acacia busai or galol. So maybe reseeding of these local species, I think it's something that has to be actually, researched, and then because this is really a very serious issue. Thank you.
So before I go to final question, in case anyone from the audience have any burning questions, we will take 1 or 2 questions to ask our panelists. But before that, I would like to ask the final question to of you. I'll start from Mary. It's a common question. So Mary, what are the best ways to protect Somaliland's ecosystem while supporting local community? I know local community, when it comes to cheetahs, they mostly people trade because they want to make income. They do charcoal production because they want to make income. So in your own experience, in your own point of view, what's the best way to protect the biodiversity, at the same time also to support local community livelihoods?
And at this point, I'm going to make a disclaimer. I'm really not familiar with much, and I haven't been working with communities in Somaliland. So take this for what it is worth. I actually strongly believe that a lot of the skills that are needed for training people for being tourist guides, for actually, I was mentioning native seed banks and some monitoring properties and things like that. If we think about the skills people will need to do those, you are developing skills that can transfer to other fields. And there will always be an interest in working as pastoralists, but there probably also will be some of the children in a family who would just as soon go out and get a job somewhere else, or maybe just because they need to. So skills development is also an issue that I think we must build into our programs for doing it. And always. Make people aware of all the wonderful things they have around them and the value of protecting them and how to do it. But when you're hungry, you're hungry. And that's going to count more than anything else. So we have to balance them all.
Do you have anything else to add, Ahmed? That same question. Do you have anything else to add? Or we can give the... Okay, now we will give the floor to one or two questions. So...
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable Minister of Environment, the Deputy Minister, the DGs, other guests, and the panel. Good afternoon. My name is Abdi. I'm Technical Advisor, Minister of Environment. My studies are development studies. I have one question. All in the morning we have been talking about. We have seen the climate change, the other sectors. We have seen how it is impacting all other sectors. So the question I have is, do we have any evidence, any reports, how climate change impacted and affected all the sectors in Somaliland? The other question is, if we don't have that evidence reports, when I'm saying the evidence is any kind of reports, baseline reports, study research that can show us the impacts of all sectors, not only the livestock, but all. If we don't have that one, how can we do that evidence, that reports, that studies? I finish.
I'm asking the panel. All. No, the panel.
Yes.
What's the benefit if we could get like so we can all come together as engineers,
Assalamu alaikum.
universities to try to make a plan?
The Minister, the Vice Minister, and the DG, and other guests here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Awale. We have been discussing and talking about educating the public, and it's very vital in promoting the awareness in biodiversity conservation and also their management. From your rare experience and that are tailored to the context in Somaliland, what strategies do you think have been effective in engaging communities so that they can be part of in preserving the environment and conservation of biodiversity, whether they are the plant species, the animal species, and others? This is very crucial because they should be part of, unless nothing important or nothing meaningful will materialize at the end. So the community engagement is very important. So I hope you have got my question. What strategies from your experience have been effective in engaging communities? And also this can be scaled up in the other parts of the country if this has been happening in one part. Thank you so much.
Well, regarding the last question, which is directed at me, which is related to community awareness and attitudinal change so that they become stewards of environment. I think most importantly, I think, it has to start from the home. From childhood, this has to start. And of course, environmental education is very important in our educational system, which I think it has to be integrated. And I know that, the ministry is doing a lot of work in the area of awareness raising. There are environmental programs that are actually being broadcast from Radio Hargeisa. So environmental awareness is very important, but at the same time, it's very important that, you know, the communities are actually, I mean, trained or, I mean, made aware about this. This is actually the approach that has been going on. The effectiveness is another thing, because sometimes, you know, the driving force of this environmental degradation is economical. And that takes us, you know, to poverty alleviation and actually for people to take, because possibly people may be cutting the trees to actually, I mean, earn a living out of it. So there is a connection between that two. Good governance, I mean, you know, poverty alleviation and all that. But most importantly, I think, you know, awareness is all the time, very important. Thank you. Regarding
I would like to thank our guest of speakers, our panelists. Thank you very much. We have learned quite a number of things during the panel session. And thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Intaanaynu kala bixin salaada iyo qadada loo baxayaa. Horta waxaan doonayaa u yara mahadnaqo marti sharafka noo yimi maanta our ministers, our executives, our specialists, our advisors. Shay baan oranayaa maanta wad arkaysaan waxa iskugu yimi malaa 10 wasaarad. dawladdii jaamacadihii dadkii ku takhasusan researchkii dhulkii xayawaankii madaxweynaha laftarkiisa ayaa u talagalay maanta inala joogo taasi maxayna tusaysaa miisaanka iyo essential importance-ka ay climate change ay ku tahay horta maanta Somaliland iyo Afrika oo dhanba sideedaba sanad walba nearly 1 million people ayaa ku dhintay climate change awgeed Somaliland maxaad u malayn kabasi darama aha marka waa culays ayuu madaxweynihii iyo dawladdii iyo anagaba nago shicibka ah culays baynu saarnay ereyadan insha Allah ilaahay baa nala qaban hadda waxa loo baxaya qadadii salaadii please 125 ama 130 aan laga dambaysiin soo noqdo insha Allah discussions kala inoo haray insha Allah hawsha halkaas aynu ka wadayna aan English ku yara bedelo yeah okay cuntada qadada waxa